Now, if you showed someone the final Premier League table of the 2024-25 season about 10 months ago, they probably would have hit you over the head with a wet sock. If you then showed them the domestic cup winners of this season, they'd probably hit you again. We had Big Six teams battling relegation. We had former relegation-threatened teams battling for the Champions League. We had teams breaking trophy droughts and unexpected breakout stars lighting up the league week in and week out. So, I guess the question is, why was football so strange this season? Now, there isn't one straight answer. There's a couple of factors we're going to delve into, and the first one's rather simple. Manchester City have won the Premier League the past 4 consecutive seasons, something that has never been done before in the 135-year history of English football. One of City's key players is Rodri. He kind of won a Ballon d'Or. Rodri is a holding midfielder, which means he holds everything together for City. When he did his ACL in September and was ruled out for the season, things started to fall apart on the blue side of Manchester. City finished the PL season with 71 points, which is a whole 20 less than last season's tally in 91. City being out of the picture opens up the title race, and Liverpool clinched their second ever Premier League title in April after an incredibly dominant campaign. However, Liverpool winning the Premier League isn't really strange. Yes, they've only done it once before, but they've come within a point of the title twice since 2019. City didn't only have a lackluster campaign in the league, but didn't win a single trophy this season. Their first time going trophyless since Pep Guardiola's first season in charge back in the 2016-17 campaign. Not winning anything opened up a chance for other clubs to have a chance. Perhaps this is why Newcastle won their first trophy in over 70 years, and Crystal Palace won their first ever trophy in their 164-year history. And although City not being as competitive this year certainly seems like a vacuum, they aren't the only competitive team in England. There's plenty of other teams capable of winning silverware, and many clubs have done so over the past couple of years. But City weren't the only club that were sleeping this year. Manchester United have seemed to have been in a transitional phase for a solid decade now. However, this year was even more severe. United were recently taken over by Jim Ratcliffe, who has been making plenty of changes behind the scenes. Taking over as a manager in England is never easy, but the changes Man United were undergoing made it even more difficult for Ruben Amorim when he replaced Erik ten Hag after the Dutchman was sacked in October. Taking over at one of the biggest clubs in the world while the season is already underway and many structural changes going on behind the scenes is an immense amount of pressure, and one that United seemed to fold under, as it finishes 3 places above the relegation zone, which is the worst league performance in over 3 decades. Man United being nowhere near a European spot opens the door for some other clubs that may not find themselves at the top of the table to compete for European football. And they weren't the only club in the Big Six that were caught lacking this year. Spurs still hadn't really replaced Harry Kane. Their owner doesn't like to spend money on players, and this isn't an ideal situation for a manager to take over the first Premier League job within. This also happens to be the exact challenge that Ange Postecoglou has faced ever since taking over Spurs last season, and it's these factors which is perhaps why Spurs finished 17th. Want to make even less sense? They won their first trophy in 17 years, and in doing so qualified for the Champions League despite finishing 1 place above the relegation zone. One way to bring just a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit of sense into this is to remember that once it was clear Spurs weren't going to get much of the league campaign, they solely focused on the Europa League, but this is still perhaps one of the strangest things I've seen in football. United and Spurs struggles potentially open up the chance for clubs that don't usually qualify for Europe to do so, and although it may not be reflected in the final table, there were many clubs on historic pushes for European football this season. Newcastle finished in Champions League spot, and Aston Villa finished in Europa League spot. And although this would have been hard to comprehend 5 years ago, it makes perfect sense now. Both clubs have played Champions League football in the past 2 years, and they've shown they have a strong enough squad and well-equipped manager in order to continue to stay competitive in this manner. I guess what caught more headlines through the course of the season was clubs that, quite frankly, nobody expected to be on the push for European football. They may have just fallen short of the mark, but Nottingham Forest, Brighton, and Bournemouth were all competing for Europa League and even Champions League positions at one point in the season. Forest has spent heavily on their squad for a couple of seasons now, but it seems like the reason they're reaping the successes now is because of their manager, Nuno Espirito Santo. This was Nuno's first full season in charge of Forest, and it seems like everything started to click. And if you look at the track record of the man, it's really no surprise. He brought Wolves from the Championship to the quarterfinals of the Europa League in just 3 years, and they still haven't seemed to have found a suitable replacement for him. He's someone that can elevate a squad. It's no surprise that Forest have been flourishing under him, and I'm also going to attribute Chris Wood's recent successes to Nuno. Chris Wood is someone who's put at 13 different clubs through his career. He's never stuck around too long anywhere, and joined Forest in the summer transfer window back in 2023. He managed to bag 15 goals and 1 assist during his first season in Nottingham, but things seem to go to the next level under Nuno. Chris Wood's 20 goals this season is joint 4th most in the Premier League, and although he still had an admirable effort his first season, the difference is this time he was stepping up during decisive moments when his club needed him. Bournemouth wrote a pretty similar story on the South Coast this year, and it's one I also attribute to having a strong manager. Andoni Iraola is someone who impressed immediately after taking the managerial position at Bournemouth in 2023, and it seems like this year was a perfect storm for his Bournemouth side. Some of the league's bigger teams sleeping meant there was a chance for a new challenger towards the top of the table, and although they fell short in the end, there was a time when a European position was very much on the cards, and it's certainly an improvement to the 12th place finish last year. Bournemouth invested heavily in their squad last summer, with the likes of Evan Nielsen, Luis Sinisterra, Dane Hussein, and Kepa Arrizabalaga shining for the cherries this season. Iraola has always seemed to have a bit about him, but the difference this season is he had the squad to back it up. And although they fell short of Europe in the end, they'll be filled with confidence and hunger to give it another go next season. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but it really wouldn't be right to finish this video off without talking about this season's domestic cups. Newcastle won their first trophy in over 70 years after the League Cup victory over Liverpool, and Crystal Palace won their first trophy in their 164-year history after their FA Cup win over Man City. Now, I guess the question is, how did this happen? My go-to response would be, it's been a bit of a perfect storm for smaller clubs this season. City's years of domestic dominance has come to a screeching halt, United and Spurs are at poverty, Chelsea are rebuilding, and Liverpool and Arsenal only seem to be focusing on the league. There's been many brilliant cup runs from smaller clubs in the past, but they've always fallen at one of the final hurdles. That would be my go-to response, but you have to remember that Liverpool and City were still defeated in the final, and both were outplayed. Sure, Liverpool had their eyes on prizes greater than the League Cup, but you bet your bottom dollar Arne Slot would have loved the chance to win his first trophy at Liverpool at the first chance possible. And one FA Cup may not seem like the greatest of deals for City, but this wasn't only their last chance to avoid their first trophyless season in 8 years, but it was also a chance to give Kevin De Bruyne a proper send-off after a decade of service to the club. So my actual answer is, Newcastle and Palace just wanted it more, and I think that's my answer to why football is so strange this season. In a time where the English game is so overrun by money, and it seems like financial status is more important than proper fans, the 2024-25 season was the one where the smaller clubs clapped back. They saw the big clubs were caught lacking and decided to show the world what they're made of. It wasn't just in England where this happened either. Just north of the border, Aberdeen won their first Scottish Cup in 35 years after defeating Celtic on penalties. Harry Kane won his first career trophy with Bayern. Hamburg were promoted back to the Bundesliga after a 7-year absence. Bologna broke their 51-year trophy drought after lifting the Coppa Italia. Go Ahead Eagles won the first ever Dutch Cup in their 122-year history, and PSG won their first ever Champions League. I guess this season reminded us that there is still beauty in the beautiful game. Okay, maybe PSG are an exception, but I really like Luis Enrique, so I'm going to keep him in. It was proof that money can't buy passion, but passion can get you a whole lot that money can't buy. I'm aware of the fact this video has been all over the place, but so is this football season, so if anything, it actually makes perfect sense. And to be honest, I'm not sure what will happen next season or what this season means in the grand scheme of things. What I do know is that it was heaps of fun, in a season I'll remember for a very long time.